The September 26th meeting of the Long Hill Planning Board is called to order at 7:32. We have the announcements, please.
Yes. Number one, call to order and statement of compliance. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by posting a copy of the public meeting hearing dates on the municipal bulletin board and website, and by sending a copy to the Echo Sentinel newspaper, and by filing a copy with the municipal clerk. Number two, standard board procedures. Any hearing conducted by the board is a quasi-judicial proceeding. Any questions or comments must be limited to issues that are relevant to what the board may legally consider in reaching a decision, and decorum appropriate to a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. Number three, meeting cutoff. Announcement is made that as a matter of procedure, it is the intention of the planning board not to continue any matter past 10:30 p.m. at any regular or special meeting or hearing of the board unless a motion is passed by the members then present to extend the meeting or hearing to a later specified cutoff time. Number four, electronic devices. All in attendance are asked to mute cell phones or any electronic devices as to not interrupt the proceedings. Number five, Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Roll call. Mayor Lavender.
Present.
Committeeman Ray is currently absent. Ms. Dill?
Present.
Mr. Hands?
Here.
Mr. Jones?
Present.
Mr. Malinowski?
Here.
Mr. File?
Here.
Vice Chairman Richardson?
Here.
Chairman Sandow?
Here.
Chairman, we have a quorum.
The first item on the agenda is to continue the hearing for the Parisi application on Delaware Avenue. Is the applicant present? We are. Come on up, make yourself comfortable.
Let the record reflect we did receive a certification of absent board member signed by Mr. Malinowski, stating that he did review the video from the September 12th meeting, and therefore he is eligible to vote. Therefore, the board has 8 voting members to process this application tonight.
We appear to have no mic.
You still have no mic?
Mike still?
The mic's not even on.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, let's just.
Debbie,
Let's start with this one.
yeah, because we can share.
All right.
Oh, he's on. Barely. Let's just change chairs.
Is it the mic or the power?
That's not gonna work. No. Piano wire tight. Brendan.
You want to use the cordless one? That's what we're supposed to share.
Been a while. You've been traveling?
Brendan, did you watch the previous hearing?
I did indeed have a few questions on HOAs.
Oh, too late.
No, that was a joke. It was a very long and interesting discussion.
So,
Take it.
Committeeman, if you could just sign the certification of absent board member after the meeting so that I can sign it.
Yep.
And Mr. Zelli, that means that you have 9 voting members.
Wonderful. For the record, Frederick Zelli on behalf of Vincent Bisagno on behalf of the applicant.
When we left off 2 weeks ago, we were in the middle of questioning the applicant's planner. Is that correct? Is that your recollection?
That is correct. Engineering testimony was completed and questioning was completed. Planning testimony was completed and we are in the middle of questioning. We will then be resting as to witnesses. We only have one witness, albeit serving 2 capacities.
And Mr. Osuch, you remain under oath.
I would like
Understood.
to remind the public that when we start questioning the engineer, we're talking about questions only on the testimony that he gave as the planner. If you have suggestions about how the board should react over and above his testimony, you have to hold those for the comments, which will take place after all the testimony and questioning. Do you have any remarks before we open it up to further questions? Deborah, I'm seeing a red light on that microphone.
Oh, we're running out of batteries already, too. Okay.
Really?
Don't, I'm sorry, I think it's-
Yeah, batteries.
That's what I want to do too, but I'm really torn because we want to spend time at Green Pond, you know, in the summer, and the trips are always in the summer. But I was looking at one that Windsor does, that starts in Scotland and goes across and goes fairly far, not Arctic Circle, pretty far. I was thinking about that. But I owe Kathy a trip first. COVID hit, we get booked at Dania.
Nothing can be easy.
Budapest down to Bucharest in the Black Sea.
She did.
That got canceled. But we're still on our list. She has to do that first. I want to go to Norway first, so.
You have no comments. All right, are there any questions of the planner carried from the last hearing? Come on up.
And a reminder to state your name and address for the record before questions.
None? Do any members of the board have any carryover
Hang on.
questions?
We got
Oh,
one.
we got one?
During the last meeting,
Would you spell your name, please?
sure, P-E-T-R-I-C-H-A. During the last meeting, the planner read several of Long Hill's Township's land use goals, including a goal to, quote, ensure that future development is compatible with and sensitive to existing residential areas and established neighborhoods, quote. How is the increase in traffic resulting from this proposed development and the through traffic resulting from the opening of the connection determined to be compatible with the existing residential area and the safe life?
Was it green? Oh, great.
It's amazing that someone his age,
It's green and it's not working.
in the indoors, in the
Battery's not good. Were those brand new batteries?
Is the battery carrier pushed all the way in?
The light should be.
Slam it
green.
hard.
It's frightening.
No, wait for it. Takes a second. I got nothing.
You wanna take this one?
Can it be moved?
Does anyone have an objection to?
You just sit there. Deb, does that microphone work there? Do you want to sit over there?
Yeah,
Problem is, we can't too well bring public back in.
no, unless he might have to sit over there, Dan.
Just sit there.
Yeah, I got
True.
nothing.
You.
I mean, I'll
Try
put the
try a
batteries
different
again.
battery.
That microphone doesn't work?
It's shutting off, I don't understand.
Yeah. That'd be good. Does this
We have a
thing work?
motion to recess to go get some batteries.
Yeah. I can't even take this.
Fred, neither of those work?
That one's working?
It's amazing.
I will.
Maybe you'll want to come.
Yeah, that'd be good.
All right, Kelly, try this one.
Yeah, put on your list. So it's not stopping.
Test. Can you repeat the question?
During the last meeting, the planner read several of Long Hill Township's land use goals, including a goal to, quote, ensure that future development is compatible with and sensitive to existing residential areas and established neighborhoods, end quote. How is the increase in traffic resulting from this proposed development and the through traffic resulting from the opening of the connection determined to be compatible with the existing residential area and the safe, quiet neighborhood?
So I think the question, if I'm hearing you correctly, is I'm reading a section of the goals of the land use ordinance that are verbatim from the land use ordinance that I pulled out. And your question is, how do those pertain to this particular project, correct?
What about the future development? How is it compatible with the quiet, safe, quiet neighborhood on the existing residential area? It's more about the connection as part of the application.
So I think to start off, which goes all the way back to the original start of the planning testimony, is when you look at a development or a proposed development, the first thing that you're going to do is go back through the land use ordinance and the overall master plan of the township. And in doing that, this proposed development, which is majority of it, is in the R2 zone with a small section of the existing property in that C zone, which we're not touching. So the R2 zone is for residential type uses, and the subdivision that's being proposed meets all of the bulk criteria and or the lot sizing criteria of that R2 zone. So from a traffic perspective, the zoning was always anticipated for this type of potential development to occur on these properties. So it fits in with the overall understanding of the potential development in the township based on the zoning. Further to that, which I hit very hard at the last meeting, and I'm going to continue to hit it very hard, is in that 1996 master plan, specifically in the circulation plan, Delaware Ave is noted as a road and the only road in that master plan to be connected on both sides of Delaware Ave, which happens to be through this subject property.
Anyone else in the audience have a question for the planner? Come on up. You can use that microphone on the wall there.
Stacy Petricka Sterling.
Speak up.
Stacy Petricka Sterling. Your application states that connecting the two halves of Delaware Avenue will result in improved traffic flow to and from the adjacent subdivision in accordance with the township's master plan. Where will that improved traffic flow occur?
the improved traffic flow is the connection between both sides of Delaware Ave, allowing the traffic to freely flow through both ends of Delaware Ave, and then ultimately out to the rest of the community.
So your application also states that the proposed 4 residential units will not significantly alter traffic patterns in the surrounding neighborhood. How can you make that determination when you are also stating that the improved traffic flow will go through neighborhoods that don't currently have traffic flow?
When you say your application, are you referring to a piece of paper or something that I?
Section 5.3 traffic, entitled traffic. It's all in the same paragraph in your application.
It's not something that I personally prepared or my office prepared. I don't know what section of the application you're speaking to exactly. I think we're
Section 5.3 traffic, it says.
Kelly, I think you could answer the question generally, though. She's saying that if your testimony was that these 4 units in and of themselves are not going to affect the traffic flow, she's questioning how are you taking into account the fact that other traffic will now go through, not just from these houses?
Am I taking into account? Yes, but also the master plan that was adopted in 1996, which contemplated this road, was also taking into account any future traffic going through this roadway or this connection of the roadway.
Okay, so I guess what I'm stuck on here is that you are saying that it will not significantly alter traffic patterns in the surrounding neighborhood, but yet, being that traffic will now flow through that neighborhood, according to this, in the same paragraph, it does sound like there will be significant traffic flow through neighborhoods that don't currently have that traffic flow.
I don't know where your threshold of significant is, but I don't anticipate a significant change in the traffic flow through that area, other than the fact that it's a connection point.
Okay, and I believe you also testified that there was no formal traffic study done for these determinations?
None that I performed, no. But again, when these master plans are written, there's backing and information that's been prepared, studied, and analyzed for the overall development of that zone, assuming full build-out. So that master plan was written assuming that the zoning that is current, that R2 zone, was full build-out or full development potential, and that road is connected, and it was anticipated, and the master plan notes that that road should be completed. So that's what we're following. It's the guidance that we've used to prepare these plans in this application.
Okay, so then the significant traffic flow through the neighborhood is just an assumption, not based on an actual traffic study.
Again, I don't know where you're getting the term significant. I don't have any numbers to back that up.
Okay, but your report says no significant, so that's just what I'm trying to.
Again, I didn't prepare a report that says anything, so I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, again, section 5.3.
5.3 of nothing that my office prepared. Do you have a document that I can look at? Because
Yeah, your impact statement.
It's this section 5 through the statement.
I just found it to be a bit contradictory.
Can I clear up something that I think might be causing some confusion?
Absolutely.
I think the report and application are stating that 4 houses, and my statement is not advocating for one position. The report is stating that 4 houses is not going to significantly increase. I think maybe the choice of word of alter should have said increased traffic flow. That's separate and apart from the Delaware Ave Road being completed all the way through, which is a separate statement about it being not being significantly impacted. That's how I'm interpreting what you're saying to be that 4 houses might not significantly increase traffic, separate from the road.
Okay, but it also says in that same paragraph that there will be increased traffic flow. So that's why I brought it up.
Sure, oh, yeah, I'm not saying that you shouldn't bring it up or shouldn't ask the question. I'm just trying to clarify what I think the difference is between 4 houses being built and the road being built through.
Okay.
Those are 2 different things, I think.
Right, because the road is being opened because the 4 houses are being built.
Sure.
Got it.
Are there any other questions from the public?
Chris Fischetti, 39 Delaware and Sterling.
Please get closer to the mic.
Chris Fischetti, 39 Delaware, Sterling.
You can pick it up if you'd like.
Good, thanks. Last time we spoke, I asked a couple of questions. I didn't feel they were answered satisfactorily, but I will ask again, since you referred to the master plan in the last 3 or 4 minutes many times, that Delaware was supposed to be a connection, and that seems to be what you're, basing a lot of your findings on. Is it fair to assume that you're very familiar with the master plan when it was written back in the mid-90s?
Am I very familiar with the master plan when it was written back in 1996 or 1995, adopted in 1996? I was not familiar. I was very young at that time, and I was not involved in that
You are
process.
familiar enough to know that and state many times that Delaware Ave was supposed to be a connection as per that master plan.
It says it verbatim in that circulation plan in the master plan.
So I guess my question is yes or no, at the time that that master plan was written, where Delaware was supposed to be a connection, was Lower Overlook an open road or not at the time the master plan was written?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm assuming based on your question that it probably was not, but I am not familiar.
It was not, that's correct. So now that that's an open road and connection to Skyview, okay, it changed the traffic patterns from that master plan, obviously.
No, not necessarily. The master plan still notes, it's still adopted, it still wants that connection between the two
I guess my
properties.
question is the relevance of the master plan, because there was a closed road that's now open. So I'm questioning the relevance of it as to the cut through from Delaware now that that road is open.
So I'm going to object to that question because I don't think this witness would be able to determine relevance of something that members of a body in this township prepared. He can interpret it, he can tell what it says, but in terms of trying to determine what was deemed relevant at the time it was passed, obviously the applicant and none of our professionals were involved in that passage.
We cannot second guess how and why the 1997 master plan was written the way it was. It is a matter of record, and the applicant is using the fact that that circulation element did in fact call for the cut-through of Delaware Avenue, and that's a constant here. We're not going to second guess why it was written that way.
I'm not questioning, all I'm saying is I want acknowledgement on the record that that master plan in the neighborhood has changed since it was written.
You asked a question and he said he didn't know.
Isn't it his job to know?
You want to answer that?
Unfortunately, I don't know all the inner workings of the township and the master plan and how it was written and how it's being formulated for any future master plan. All I can do is read the documents as they're adopted, and I've also read, that are no longer on the website, the draft documents of the future master plan. And as I testified to 2 weeks ago, it was still noted in that draft plan that I read prior to that meeting, and it's obviously still in the adopted master plan as of 1996.
But the master plan has changed since then.
No, it hasn't. It's the adopted.
It absolutely has.
No,
Absolutely has.
no. Here,
There was a,
We
Please
do
take a
not
step back.
know, we do not know the circumstances on Lower Overlook that caused the master plan to be written the way it was in 1997. We have to take that as a given, and we're not going to debate whether or not It was made with a full knowledge of all the facts that you now are relating to us. It's over. The words are there, and that's our, I saw another hand in the audience. You want to make ask a question? I'm sorry, please come to the microphone.
If you want to make a comment on the application, you'll have the opportunity to. This portion of the public hearing is solely for questions of this witness about his testimony.
Well, in fairness, Ms. Parisi, I'm going to ask you not to ask a question. Since you're part of the applicant, it's just... Please take my advice. It would be better if you don't at this point. Thank you.
John Petricka. Two questions.
Your name, please?
John Petricka.
Thank you.
Two questions. The first is, you just referred to this draft of a master plan. Do I understand it correctly that in 2 days, on Thursday, there will be a draft of another master plan?
Excuse me. This is a time for questions about the testimony that the planner has given. The next master plan is not an issue here, and will not be an issue until it has been adopted, which is several months from now.
But it's going to be released in 2 days.
Say that again?
It's going to be released in 2 days for the public to view?
A draft will be released for public comments, but again, this part of the hearing is for questions of the planner and his testimony.
Got it.
The planner, didn't he mention that he referenced this draft? So let's let him ask the question.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think I got my answer. So just to summarize that, there will be a draft of the new updated master plan released in 2 days for the public to view. There will be a hearing on this, I believe, scheduled for October, and then there'll be a vote on it in November, if I have that correct.
That is the board's tentative schedule at this point.
Great, thank you. My question here is, what is the result of the investigation requested at the last meeting where a board member asked you to review the connection of the road between Lounsbury Meadow and Knoll as an alternative to opening the road?
So I took a look at that prior to this meeting, looked at it on Google Maps and quickly did a drive-by of the site. It does appear that there's some type of plastic chain crossing a driveway between two parking lots. I don't think it's really relevant to this application though, because those particular two developments are two private developments and they are not a public road. And further to that, it's connecting the multifamily development has one way in on both developments, and really I think the purpose of that is more for a circulation path for any emergency vehicles to get in and out of those overall developments. So I think for that particular site, those particular sites, it's a good solution, but I don't think it works for the intent of this project and more importantly for a public roadway, once that public roadway is dedicated.
Are there any other questions from the public? I see one.
Glenn Holmes, 137 Woods End. My
question is, you rely, are you ignoring the master plan when it doesn't help your request for 4 variances on these properties? It appears that whenever it helps your case, you reply, oh, the master plan helps us do this, when what you are asking for is 4 variances for the allowance where there should be 2 properties.
Yeah, so if you go back and listen to the testimony that I provided, planning testimony, yes, I referred to the master plan, but I also refer to other sections within that master plan and the land use ordinances, which are the purposes of the land use ordinance and the purposes of the master plan. And if you go through point by point on those, I think this project and this application does a very good job of providing positive feedback and positive criteria to ultimately grant those variances or allow the board to grant those variances should they vote to approve the application.
Thank you. The master plan calls for this to be 2, it's accepted as it's 2 lots right now. And are you requesting for 4 lots?
It's one property.
It is 1 property. Does the master plan allow you to build 2 houses as is without a variance?
I mean, that's not what's being proposed.
There is storage for 2 properties.
I'd
No.
like to interrupt here.
Yeah.
You keep referring to the master plan. The relevant document is the land use ordinance of the town as it has been adopted since 1996 and since it has been amended many times thereafter. This is a large lot. A subdivision is entirely lawful under the current ordinance. The master plan may or may not make reference to the subdivision, but clearly this is the largest lot in the neighborhood and and I'm not going to comment as to whether or not it can or should be subdivided, but the application has asked for a subdivision, and that's what we're hearing.
Thank you. But the storage facilities allow for two units, 2 dwellings.
Sewage facilities do not constrain the land use.
Thank you. And has there been a highest and best use study done on the single lot and the 4 lots?
Not prepared by my office or by me.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions of the applicant's planner? Board members, board staff, any questions? All right, at this point, we will close the question session. You may sit down, and we will open the meeting to comments from the public. These are free-form comments. I ask you to limit your comments to 3 minutes. And at the conclusion of the comments, I will ask the applicant's counsel to sum up for us, and then the board will go into its discussion.
Mr. Chair, may I just ask one question of the audience in general? Are there any attorneys present, or is anyone here this evening represented by counsel in this matter? All right, thank you.
Thank you for asking. All right. Comments, general comments.
And before you speak, let me just swear you in.
Sure.
You swear that any testimony you'll give in front of this board will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, name and address for the record, please.
My name is Vito Menza. I live on 6 Lower Overlook Road. I've been a resident here in town since 1982. When we bought the house, Lower Overlook was a cul-de-sac. We knew that. And we also knew that eventually, when the St. Joseph Shrine property was going to be sold, it would be developed. And when we purchased the property, we knew that Lower Overlook would eventually be part of Skyview. We also knew at the time that we purchased our house that if that property was developed, there would also be another egress in and out of the development from Morristown Road, from Lower Overlook and Delaware Avenue. So for 20 years, we enjoyed the privacy of a cul-de-sac. 20 years later, the development was being built, and Lower Overlook was taken through to connect Skyview. But at that time, Delaware was never completed. So Lower Overlook had to take all the brunt of the traffic coming in and out of that development for 20 years. So now, finally, 20 years later, the road hopefully goes through, eases our traffic load. And for the people who purchased the property over there on Skyview or Delaware, they knew at the time they purchased that property that Delaware was eventually going to be a through street. So they didn't purchase the property blind. They knew when they purchased it that it was going to go through. So I'm all in favor of easing the traffic on our side, which is Lower Overlook and Skyview. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? Maybe it would be well for you to form a line, so I don't have to ask each time.
Chris Fischetti, 39 Delaware, Sterling.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear that any testimony you'll give in front of this board will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do. So just one thing. Yeah, we, as a resident of 39 Delaware, we did know this was a possibility, but at the time what I did not know is that my second daughter would be born with severe special needs, okay? She has a rare genetic disorder. It causes a gross delay in both her cognitive and motor functions. And part of this delay is a lack of basic awareness of her surroundings. In other words, she has no fear factor, okay? Now, she's an absolute blast to have at an amusement park. She loves rides, she's fun. But again, the daily grind and hardships that my wife and I have to deal with are exhausting, and sadly, the extension of Delaware would not only compound an already challenging situation, but it could endanger the life of my daughter. I don't say that lightly, okay? Mr. Parisi is my neighbor, and it's privately owned land, and I am in full support of him subdividing his own properly owned land. The only thing I would ask is that the board reject the application as is and work towards an alternative, cul-de-sac or some type of emergency access only passage. And again, I can go in, I won't speak for my neighbors and other residents, I could go into a million other concerns that they would have, but in a public comment forum, I have to make it personal about my own situation, and that is my number one concern, my family and my daughter. And again, I do not want to stop Mr. Parisi from doing what he wants to do with his own land. That's his right. But I think between the board, the applicant, and the residents, we can come up with some sort of alternative that would be suitable for everybody. So that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you.
For now.
Elaine Giebig, Chestnut Run.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony you'll give in front of this board will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, could you please spell your last name?
Giebig. Okay. The main concern that I have, which is shared by the people of Chestnut Run, is the drainage of this site. We are downhill, very much downhill, and the area, that surrounding area, is prone to flooding. Morristown Road often has water overlapping the sides, and sometimes it's impassable. More water doesn't bode well, so I'm very nervous and anxious about the drainage plan for this site. We have dry basements at Chestnut Run, and we want to keep them. The fact that the town does not want to own maintenance of the storm retention pond, that's what we're calling it, right, is very worrisome to me. How onerous is the maintenance on this pond? I have no idea, but I have a pretty good idea that 4 homeowners shouldn't be undertaking it. Having a 4-home HOA is not a plan. I've been in an HOA for 19 years. 10 of those years I was on the board. People do not always do what's in their bylaws and deeds that they're supposed to do. We have had people stain their deck red when everyone knows it's supposed to be brown. We have had someone damage one of their 2-car garages and replace it with a non-matching door. People do what people do. It's just, I could go on, but I don't think that this plan to have the drainage situation handled by a 4-home HOA is doable. As a matter of fact, you may have heard the chuckles in the audience from those of us who were there. There needs to be a better plan, a more workable plan. So planning board, you have a responsibility to protect the neighborhood. Not just Mr. Parisi, who has a right to develop the property, I don't question that. But the neighbors have to be protected. The future homeowners of those 4 homes have to be protected as part of this whole development. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm going to ask the board engineer to be prepared to respond to the question about municipal ownership when we're finished with the public comments. Any other public comments?
Bob English, 58 Magna Drive in Gillette.
Do you swear that any testimony you give in front of the board will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Proceed.
Okay, I've been here in Long Hill about, I guess, 35 years now, and on the first aid squad for about 30. I've also been involved.
Bob, would you use the mic so that the folks at home can hear you?
Yes.
Or you'll have to shout louder.
Well, I can do that too.
Sorry, your last name again?
English, real
you.
easy. E-N-G-L-I-S-H. I've been involved in emergency services for a long time here in the town with Ken Fulligar going way back, and we've actually talked about that road, Delaware, quite a bit over the years. And in my world, emergency services, keep in mind, we have to get to your facility. And I'm talking about the police, I'm talking about fire, I'm talking about EMS, I'm talking about paramedics, I'm talking about the gas company, and a whole bunch of other people. So in my world, I hate dead-end streets. I like wide streets. I like level streets, okay? And I realize in the planning board, you can't adjust everything to what you'd like, okay? But a through street is a big advantage for EMS and especially fire. And I know that especially the people on the west end of Delaware, they got a real problem, because if there was ever a fire in one of those complexes, it would be a real zoo in there. There's not much room at all. And what we like to do on a fire is usually the fire departments come in on one end and EMS will come in on the other end. And you're not able to do that in the west end of Delaware. So we like a lot of options getting to various locations in town. And especially this town, we have a lot of floods. You have telephone poles coming down. Over the last week, I think we've had, 8 or 10 or a dozen trees come down, blocking roads. And keep in mind, when that happens, how do we get to your house? How do we get there? And nobody really thinks about all of that. Like today, I went over on Delaware, and I just rode up and down. And I would say at least 6 or 7 houses do not have numbers on their mailboxes. So at 2 o'clock in the morning in a rainstorm, how are we going to find your house? But, you know, since I've become involved in emergency services, that's the stuff I look for. So when you make your decision, there's a lot of trade-offs. But one of the trade-offs would be, how do we get emergency services to you? In my opinion, and also the first aid squad, and I think the fire department and police would also agree, a through street would be much more valuable to us than the situation we have right now. Any questions?
I do have a question,
Go
because you have an expertise here. Just help me out, if you could, the notion of a emergency exit, if you will, or connection between the two. So it's not a full connection. Does that delay response in any way?
Yes, it would. One of the problems you're going to have with that is, and it's going to seem simple, but Google Maps is not going to show that. Okay? It's going to, you know, show a dead end right there. So if we got people from Berkeley Heights or Lyons, VA, responding to a fire or emergency situation, they're not going to know all of that. And there's also probably, you're talking about a plastic chain or something like that connecting it. Well, you know, in the middle of the night, you're going to forget there's a plastic chain there, or, you know, you're not even going to realize it. So it's better than nothing, but it's not a good situation.
Thank you. I've got a question.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. English, for all your service. When you leave your office and you go out on a call and you're making your way over to the western edge of Division, what would your route be?
Probably go up to Lower Overlook and come down.
If you have that cut through,
Yes.
that road is
We would use a
made,
cut through.
and how much time could you possibly save?
Probably 30, 40 seconds, something like
That's
that.
significant when it's in a life change.
It is significant, and especially for a fire. For us, it's significant sometimes, but for fire, 40 seconds is a lot of time.
But the fire department's gonna be coming from the west,
Yes.
right?
And their problem is gonna be, how do they get to the condominiums or whatever on the east side? They're gonna have to go all the way around and in.
Either coming down
The
Valley or they
problem,
gotta go
the
over-
problem with the other side, the west side of Delaware, is like Berkeley Heights Fire Department. How are they gonna get there? So they have to go all the way around. And keep in mind, when the floods and the trees come down and everything, it's a real challenge to try to get to certain houses. We've put people on boats getting them. And I went over there today just to look at the development, and you got a telephone pole right there on the corner of the western part of Delaware. That comes down, you're not gonna get out of the eastern part of Delaware, you're not gonna get out of there. Now, I personally live up on Magna Drive, and we got Preston and Magna and Lacey. And I'm very happy that we've got two entrances into that complex, because we've had trees down, actually on both ends at one time, and you couldn't access that whole area.
So that whole area, you can only access from the east on one point of entry without Delaware being all the way through. Overlook is the
right.
only entry into that area from the
Right.
east. You have two from the west, and those roads are very
Right.
narrow, trying to navigate your way through there.
Right.
Thank you.
Can I
Any other
just-
questions?
Yeah, if I could, because
Sure.
of your experience, do you have any other solutions or situations that you could suggest to be considered, as opposed to, we talked about a chain, we talked about the road as proposed. Are there any alternatives that meets the emergency needs but maybe helps calm the traffic?
Not really, no.
Single lane road or something like that, or gravel road, or anything different?
It's not an ideal situation, you know? There's a lot of things you can do. If you keep it the way it is, we'll get there eventually. The only problem is, there's gonna be a time delay.
Thank you.
For example, on a CPR call, which is very critical, the first people are gonna be there are the police. And you don't know where the police are gonna be coming from. And they don't know either, all right? So again, they need a lot of options on how to get to that scene, depending on where they are.
I have a question.
Yep.
Hi, Bob. Do you have any anecdotal evidence on situations you've experienced, you've heard from fire and police, where perhaps it was negatively impacted by not having that cut through?
Yeah, I think just about any dead-end street, and I think 3 or 4 years ago, we went over to Berkeley Heights, and it was a dead-end street, probably about 300 yards long, and it was a real zoo because you had all the fire departments lined up behind each other, and we didn't even have access to that street, so we had to park quite a distance away, and there were two fatalities in that fire.
Yeah. I was referring, though, to anything specific to the Delaware area, anything anecdotally where...
Well, I know we've been to houses on both ends of that. Yeah.
Thank you, Bob.
Okay.
Appreciate you
Thank
coming.
you.
Are there any other comments from the public?
Hi, Nicole Finelli, Skyview Terrace. I guess I'd first like to state for the record...
Hold on a second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You swear that any testimony you'll give in front of the board will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. You can proceed.
Thank you. I'll state for everyone that I actually live on the north part of Skyview Terrace, so the opening of Delaware would probably benefit me personally. However, having lived in the neighborhood for 12 years now, I've enjoyed the dead-end area of Delaware Avenue, and I appreciate the last person's testimony. I think he does bring up a decent point. However, looking at the day-to-day probably incidents of our emergency services versus the number of pedestrian drivers that would be coming through the neighborhood, it seems that would far outweigh the need for emergency services coming through. And I would like to propose that the board does consider leaving that road either closed or open only to emergency services. People drive extremely fast down Delaware Avenue. We have a lot of friends and kids in the neighborhood. We also have a park at the end of Delaware Avenue that a lot of kids enjoy walking to and riding their bikes to, and having that be a through road would just encourage cars to go even faster through that part of the neighborhood to cut through. And again, I think there would be substantially more traffic from that than from the likely emergency services. I also agree that Mr. Parisi is fully entitled to develop that land, not disputing that. So again, would just like to consider that the road not be opened. Additionally, to the concern of the water basin, I know we do have one in the neighborhood currently that is maintained by the town. I do see the public works people there quite regularly cleaning it out. And we've had a lot of rain lately. It does still fill up with water, which I think, increases mosquitoes and other bugs in the area. So I would just like to note to the committee that that is an area of concern as well. That if it isn't owned by the town, it's likely not going to get cleaned out by anyone, because even with the town maintaining the one we do have, it still backs up on a regular basis. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Swear that any testimony you'll give in front of the board will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth? And can you state your name and address for the record,
Yes,
please?
Cheryl Smith, Schindler Terrace in Gillette.
Please get closer to the microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry. Cheryl Smith, Schindler Terrace in Gillette. First of all, my job takes me on the road every day, and I travel many miles. And although I live on the short side of Delaware, my husband and I do a lot of walking. We walk on the other side. We cut through the little paper street, as we call it, and we've run into a lot of bears. We don't see a lot of traffic on the other side. We walk all the way down to the lake many, many, many times. We don't see a lot of traffic on that side either, which is nice for the children and everything. So it would be nice to keep it that way. What I do see in many different towns are a lot of speed bumps, a lot of 15-mile-an-hour areas with a lot of speed bumps. So if we can't keep the road closed, and I understand, believe me, Bob English, you know, I have nothing but praise for him. He is what got my son to be the paramedic he is today. So maybe a few speed bumps, and on both sides, that would keep people from cutting through. So there are ways that we could do this that would be a good compromise. I really like a gate personally. I really like keeping it the way it is personally, but if we can't, there are some better options than just leaving it open and having, you know, people race through, because that's what they're gonna do. They all wanna get to the other side. They all want a nice cut through, and we know that's gonna be the worst, the most dangerous thing for all these kids. And on our side, it may not be kids, but there are a lot of ladies walking dogs and doing other things, and I think it's just gonna be, that you're gonna have the first aid squad there even more. So there are other ways that we could do this that would be safe for everybody. So please try to find one of them. Thank you.
Thank you.
First aid squad is pretty busy
Mm.
already.
Mm.
I'm still Stacy Petricka from Sterling.
Raise your right hand, ma'am.
Oh.
Do you swear that any testimony you'll give in front of this board will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
I have been an active volunteer in several communities over the years, but I will admit that I have never been in a position where my decisions affected the safety, home values, and overall quality of life of the people in my community. Having said that, I sincerely wish to express my appreciation for all of our board members who are volunteering their time and actively seeking and considering the opinions and concerns of all of the people in our community. I came to know many of you remotely via Zoom when this applicant submitted his previous application during the pandemic. From what I recall, there had been comments from the board members about how to remedy potential safety issues that may result from opening the connection between the two halves of Delaware Avenue, which is still part of this current application. There were conversations amongst the board about potentially adding speed bumps, so I believe there was concern on behalf of the board about the safety with regard to speeding. There was talk amongst the board of potentially adding additional stop signs. Again, I assume this was regarding concern about safety. There was talk amongst the board about potentially making the narrow streets one way. So I assume the board members were cognizant of the possibility for a need to deal with added traffic on a narrow street traveled regularly by cyclists and pedestrians, but lacking sidewalks with little room to install sidewalks. I am baffled and concerned by the omission of these discussions for this current application. Why are these issues not being discussed this time? I fear these aforementioned remedies have the potential to be costly and inconvenient to taxpayers. They will most certainly affect the homeowners living in this area currently, and not just the residents who were physically able to make it here tonight. For nearly 30 years, people have bought and sold homes along Delaware Avenue, which has always been a quiet residential street. I would like to see this board consider this, as well as the potential safety issues and subsequent cost before voting to open the connection on Delaware Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Robert Gasselberty from 48 Delaware Avenue in Sterling.
Do you swear that any testimony you'll give in front of the board will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
So has the planning board taken into consideration what the increased traffic would be like going around Chestnut Street? I'm sure everyone's familiar with how narrow that street is. And has there been any, I guess, proactivity on your part to remediate the narrowness of that street? And how was it dovetail in to the increased traffic that Delaware will see if this street is opened up. So there has been none.
I think I heard a question mark at the end of that sentence. We're only looking for your comment, not,
Well, that's my comment. How will we adjust the traffic pattern for Chestnut to being so narrow? I lived in the neighborhood for 28 years, and I can tell you how dangerous it is to go through there when two cars are trying to pass. And the larger vehicles, you can't even pass two people or a school bus at the same time. So that's my question is, what type of planning has been done on your part to mediate that dangerous situation? And I'm sure the EMS can't even get through there with their vehicles as well.
okay, I thank you for your comment, and we will discuss that later on when the board deliberates.
I hope they take that into great consideration because this is a dangerous area. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. John Patinas, 79 Delaware Avenue, Sterling, New Jersey.
You swear that any testimony you'll give in front of the board will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
So help me God.
Thank you.
John, you look older than the last time I saw you.
I feel older. I feel very old now. I'm here 29 years, so I've seen a lot in this town. I have also seen a lot not changed. Do you want to hear a joke before I start?
Yeah.
So when I first came to this town, an older person told me that when George Washington came through here, he said, "Don't do anything until I come back," and the town is still waiting. Meaning that we don't change.
He hasn't come back.
And he hasn't come back. There you go. A couple comments I have is, we know the master plan hasn't changed since 1997. And unfortunately, it's not an organic document that changes with evolution. And when we know that things like an artery, like a lower overlook, has been opened, that it doesn't take that into account, but certainly our planning board should. And it should be noted because for the last 29 years, I have never seen a problem with emergency vehicles coming and going. They always had, and we've always had quiet streets. But I know, I take myself back as opposed to just being personally affected. If you open up Delaware, that hasn't been open for 29 years that I've been here, and obviously even before that, the people that may use Delaware, it's parallel to Valley Road, so hypothetically that person is going to avoid 4 traffic lights. 4 traffic lights to get to their destination quicker. The bigger problem that I have is that the plan calls for Delaware Avenue, the new portion, to be 29 feet or 30 feet wide. Is that correct? Well, I know it is because I remember. And then I measured my house on 79 Delaware. We're 29 and a half feet wide. So that allows at least 2 cars plus cars parked on the side to pass each other. Lower overlook may not so because it's winding, but here's the problem. People come down Delaware east or west, you hit the stop sign by the lake, there's Maple Street on both sides. Does anybody know how wide that street is? 16 and a half feet.
How much?
16 and a half feet. I measured it. 17 at its widest, and it's winding. So, let's go back to, right. So, let's go back to elementary math. If 2 cars passing are 7 feet wide from mirror to mirror, that's 14 feet. My SUV, which is a Grand Cherokee, which is not a large vehicle, it's mid-size, is 7 feet wide. That's 14 feet. So that gives you 1 foot on either side to the curb without kissing it and ruin your tires, and 1 foot in passing. I am telling you right now, in the 29 years I've been coming here, as soon as you get to the stop sign, if you're looking up top, you're waiting for a car to come down and hypothetically waiting for the wide spot around the corner to pass. And then, so if you're going to unleash traffic once this goes through on either side, EMS and the fire department and the police are going to be down at the Sterling Lake because people are going to be hitting each other, and they're going to also be inflicting damage on themselves as well. So I really think that is the major problem with opening up Delaware. And then, of course, it's also a park. So you're going to have kids down there swimming and stuff, the ice cream truck, and now all of a sudden you got cars coming, going during rush hour, whether it's schools coming in, going out. It's going to be a problem. And then once you approve that, you can't take it back. You got to live with it. So I implore you that you think about those things I just discussed before you open it. And I certainly, if I owned that property, I would want it developed just like Mrs. Parisi would, but I think that it should be only allowed for emergency vehicles when deemed necessary. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Does anyone else in the audience have a comment?
Glenn Holmes, 137 Woods End.
You swear that any testimony you'll give in front of the board will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do, thank you.
Mr. Holmes, can you please speak, use the microphone in your hand? Thank you.
Can I use this one?
Sure, that's fine.
Test. My comments to the board is we're interrupting the lives of people on 9 streets, Old Delaware Avenue, Skyview Terrace, Cedar Hollow Drive, Fernwood Terrace, Crabapple Lane, Woods End, Fox Hollow, Primrose Lane, and Schneider Terrace. They're all being interrupted by the development of potentially 2 houses on the master plan. I believe a highest and best use should be looked upon to see if this is the best way forward to allow the 2 houses in. And I believe it will be accepted because it would be in homogeneous congruity with the rest of that neighborhood, the Overlook Skyview area. And that's pretty much my whole comment. You know, there's more people being affected by this than the value of some entrepreneurial profit of trying to put in 4 houses where there should be 2. Thank you.
Last call for public comments. Which one of you wants to go last?
Everyone's dying to speak to you.
What, your name and address for the
Tiffany
record?
Fischetti, 39 Delaware Avenue.
Do you swear that any testimony you'll give in front of this board will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Proceed.
Can you hear me? Good evening. My name is Tiffany Fischetti, 39 Delaware Ave. I'm at the corner of Skyview and Delaware. It's 2 houses from where this proposed development is. We received the certified mail on Labor Day weekend this year about this proposal. Last time it was New Year's Eve, so I know some of my neighborhood neighbors have said that we got to hang out with all of you in 2021. That was the majority of the year, I would say. We all got to attend. My husband Chris and I attended all of the Zoom calls and meetings ever since, so a bit of deja vu. We've lived here for about 12 years and have seen it turn over from the 1994 development, where many of the original families are now downsizing and young families are moving in. If you drive around, you now see a lot more bikes, families, strollers walking around the neighborhood than ever, hence the reason we have become so invested in ensuring that whatever occurs at the end of our street is done with the rest of the neighborhood in mind as well. As my husband mentioned, we have 2 daughters, almost 8 and 10. The younger one does have special needs with no safety awareness, especially when she is outside. Her quick ability to leave an area is a parent's worst nightmare, especially for a child who is essentially nonverbal and also a type 1 diabetic. That closed road has been a saving grace ever since learning about all of her issues, because we never had to worry about traffic coming through that end of the street. A lot of the kids in our neighborhood, especially during COVID, have learned to ride bikes in there. It's just been a quiet nature hike trail that everyone likes to go through. The parts of the street we do worry about are the cars that come flying up Delaware. They go up Skyview, or the ones that come down Delaware and head all the way to the lake. Once the cars reach the end of Delaware, Like John had mentioned, they are faced with the decision of making a left or right onto Maple, which is only 16 feet wide without the sidewalks. I know a number of neighbors and friends have had issues where their kids have to jump onto people's lawns because they're waiting for a bus. There's no sidewalks there. The bus stops are really in front of someone's house on like a piece of lawn in the front. If we create Delaware to function similarly to Valley and Long Hill Road, which are the two parallel roads, we are creating a major public safety hazard to those in the community and the recreation that occurs by the Sterling Lake. I would ask that Mr. Parisi, if we are continue with this proposal, that he consider closing that one side of the road, essentially making the additional houses an extension of that side of Delaware. There's no need to connect the road to Chestnut Run since Lower Overlook provides that access as we discussed. Frankly, I would think that putting 4 brand new houses in a cul-de-sac is actually a lot more marketable and profitable for whichever developer ends up doing this versus the 4 houses in the woods with a busy connecting road. I would also ask the board to look at the other developments in town where they've been able to successfully develop a cul-de-sac versus connecting the road. The one that comes to mind is the Charles Road, that the community, especially the neighborhood there, when that new neighborhood was put in, the neighborhood fought to that proposal, which was to connect to Woodgate and out to Carlton. That was going to also create another cut through to get through Carlton. I wasn't around for that. It seemed like a little while back, but that was an example where that was successfully done. Right now, if you drive to Charles Road, all the new houses are there, the woods are there, and then the road's on the other side. It doesn't connect through, and everyone's happy. So I would ask that you look at other examples where it does not connect. I know Lounsbury Meadow was also mentioned as well. There are countless other examples of dead-end streets in Long Hill. I know Mr. English spoke about some of the dead-end streets with emergency access. We actually have 3 dead-end streets on Delaware. Baker, Sterling, and Country Lane are also all dead-end streets. I haven't seen any issues in the 12 years we've been here as far as emergency. Not to say that there never would be, but I'm assuming with any dead-end street in Long Hill Township, we would have a backup, turnaround. We're not even asking for a dead end, even just a cul-de-sac to be able to turn around while you're in there. This way they would still have access. There are so many other things I could have mentioned about the environmental, wildlife, stormwater, the topography. We actually had to put in a retaining wall behind our house. My older neighbors that have been here 30 years have said that our house and the one next to us actually were never, I think, originally part of the plan. They were developed maybe at the very end because the topography behind our house was so steep and all the issues that would ensue. So we've dealt with some of that. I would imagine as you get even further over, it's even steeper, which obviously we've discussed here. I know this is a business proposition, but for those of us in the development, there's a lot more at stake. I would kindly ask that you seriously consider denying this proposal as is and find a compromise that is more agreeable to all parties involved. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for preparing your remarks. It makes it go a whole lot smoother.
Pamela Ogens, The Crescent in Millington,
What's your last name again? I'm sorry.
OGENS.
Thank you. You swear that any testimony you'll give in front of the board will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Proceed.
Having spent, and this is a comment not just for the board, but also for my fellow Long Hill Township residents, having served 3 years on the Master Plan Planning Committee as a non-planning board member, I'd like to say to my fellow residents, because you've heard a lot of mentions tonight to the master plan, that this illustrates just how important the master plan is, that it reflects the vision of the residents of the township. The master plan will be released for review. I'm putting in my plug to please residents review it. Don't just think of it as another useless document. You've seen tonight how it can impact. Thank you.
Last call for comments from the public. All right, I'm going to close comments from the public, and I'm going to deviate just a little bit from the normal schedule. and ask the board engineer to talk for a little bit about the municipal detention basin question that came up.
So, the basis of the discussion at the initial hearing, and a lot of what we've referenced back to here tonight, is New Jersey Administrative Code 7:8-5.8. It's the maintenance requirements under the stormwater rules of the state of New Jersey. Every municipality has a coordinating ordinance, your stormwater control ordinance, that effectuates NJAC 7.8 in its entirety to be applied at a local level when there's no DEP reviews or permitting involved in a project. So the discussions over maintenance and the entity or responsible party stem from discussions in this subsection regarding the requirement that the maintenance plan identify the name, address, and telephone number of the person or persons responsible, and specifically that a individual shall not be identified as the with the obligation of being the responsible party. A individual, the homeowner of each of these individual lots if created, can be identified through an agreement to have specific maintenance requirements, but there does need to be a responsible party to ensure that maintenance is occurring. As it relates to whether it's a private entity, which would start with this development with Mr. Parisi as the applicant being the initial responsible party, or if it then transfers to the municipality, I'd respectfully turn to those members of our board that are also members of the committee and note that it's your jurisdictional line at your other position on this dais to determine if you and the rest of that committee as a whole would like to receive the development. I do not believe it is something to be decided by this board tonight, but it would have to be left open for you to receive it. I believe there's some work to be done if the township is going to look to receive the stormwater maintenance requirements of residential developments in amendments of ordinances and other such, specifically that this subsection of NJAC 7.8 refers to a developer's obligation to dedicate stormwater management facilities to such persons under an applicable ordinance or regulation. And the model ordinance from the state of New Jersey does specifically address an echoing of these maintenance requirements and affords comments on consideration for a committee on whether or not they want to enumerate in an ordinance the acceptance of stormwater facilities from private development. Traditionally, that's for residential developments, and private developments for commercial tend to be addressed as the applicant and the developer being the responsible party. I think it would be most appropriate for the committee to make this decision of whether or not they decide to accept it from an ultimate fate of the responsible party being Parisi to start. What we cannot allow is that we walk out of this room with that as the only two options, because he needs to have an entity to transfer rights to when he doesn't have any ownership interest in the property. And that would be a mechanism of a homeowners association or some other entity, whatever we want to call it. I'll stop saying HOA, to receive the responsible party designation so that the municipality can enforce on that responsible party the requirements to do so under our obligations to the state of New Jersey and the EPA under the MS4 Tier A permit. The existing developments to both the east and west of the subject application were developed prior to the 2004 stormwater rules, which established essentially our benchmark of modern requirements for maintenance. At that time, traditionally, it was rather common that a development of any size for single-family homes or condominiums on public streets may transition the municipality. Since that date, the obligation had been put on the developer and the responsible party, and then there was opportunity to transition that to a public entity as a township or an HOA and some other entity. There's a model ordinance that was reviewed back at that time and was obligated from the state of New Jersey for the township to consider. And the township passed an appropriate ordinance to accept the stormwater rules back then. In 2021, this was also a requirement of the amended stormwater rules for green infrastructure. At that time, the amendments were done. The amendments in your code currently are a deviation from the model ordinance. They're not simply a carbon copy of the model ordinance trickling down, which is essentially copying this entire 7:8 and dropping it in your code. There is nothing wrong with your ordinance as it stands. Your ordinance is by citation reference, which essentially says the entirety of 7:8 is to apply. But what it doesn't do is give you an opportunity in the maintenance section to address where the township believes is within their interest to receive, whether it be by density, total number of lots, size of the project. The state of New Jersey, with major development definition for stormwater rules, does not distinguish between the type of development. It distinguishes only on the disturbance and the impact of that development. So respectfully to those parties that are interested in this application privately, it doesn't contemplate 4 homes being built or two large condominiums being built on these properties. It only contemplates the thresholds of 1 acre of disturbance and a 1/4 acre of impervious or regulated motor vehicle surface, and that is occurring. So maintenance has to be done. It has to be in accordance with the state regs. I believe it's in the township's best interest that when the consideration of accepting the ultimate fate of these responsibilities goes to the committee looks at the revised model ordinance, which was posted in late August by the state of New Jersey as a reflection of the recent inland flood protection rules that were promulgated in July. This municipality does not have to take action on that revised model ordinance because we have an existing citation-based ordinance. So we are current as of July 17th for the stormwater rules. But what this does is give you an opportunity to reflect on the model ordinance and look at whether or not you want to specifically enumerate these maintenance issues and where the benchmark would be for a residential development to be inherited for BMPs and maintenance by the municipality, or if it was to remain with the developer and ultimately potentially to an HOA. It gives you a framework in your ordinances to consider this on a greater level and tackle the question completely so it could be applied to this project as well as all the others in the future.
Thank you, Joe. Counselor, do you want to summarize the applicant's case?
I can do that. What you've heard this evening from many members of the community, and we certainly thank you all for coming out, is that there's concern, obviously, about the street going through. There's some concern about drainage. Your engineer's just given us a very good tutorial on what that involves. As we said at the first meeting, we understand that those regs have to be complied with in some fashion. And what this board has the ability to do is to approve the subdivision, and a condition of approval being that those regs have to be complied with in whatever fashion it might end up being, whether it's privately or through the committee, through the township. So we can leave that for another day, in essence, and you can still approve the application. What we're looking for in terms of variance relief hasn't been commented on at all by any member of the public. We're essentially looking for variance because one of the lots completely encroaches upon an isolated small part of slopes. The word slope has not come up once in any of the public questioning or any of the public commentary, to the best of my recollection, in any of the board's comments or questions. Did it come up once? Okay. I apologize, then once, I don't recall it. So what we're looking for is something that, but for the slopes, and but for the conservation easement portion in the back, which may or may not, Ms. Lehaney, I'm not sure if you've ultimately decided that we're going to include those as variances or not. The safe, cautious way to be to include them. But there, again, there's been no comment on the conservation. It's a very technical concept. There's no frontage, so we can't comply with front setbacks, and that portion doesn't comply with the acreage requirement, even though the lot does. So really, the only variance relief of any actual substance that we're seeking is for that one isolated slope that essentially nobody's mentioned. Otherwise, this application, as far as subdivision goes and the number of lots goes, is essentially as of right. You certainly have the ability to look at the whole concept, to look at the street. We understand that. We think we've presented valid reasons for that street to go through, starting with the fact that it's been in the master plan now for going on 30 years. The master plan has been revisited. It's being revisited now. And as of now, in any event, and certainly as of the time that this application was deemed complete, the master plan said that this street is to go through, and all we're doing is following your master plan and following your law in that regard. So we also understand the drainage issue, as I said, that has to be taken into account. But as far as whether to approve this subdivision, it should certainly be approved. It should be approved with the condition, obviously, of the drainage being taken care of. We do request that you approve it with the road going through, not only because it's been provided for so many years in your master plan, but because of the ability to facilitate first response in the event of emergencies. I certainly am sympathetic, as I'm sure we all are, to the Fischetti situation. I'm a father of 5. I'm also a first responder. I'm hearing a lot of things that ring true to me personally, and I'm sure that's happening to all of you as well. But we need to look at this from the perspective of the entire township, and I'm sure you understand that, and that's all we're asking that you do. So we thank you and everyone for your patience at the first meeting and this evening, and we would appreciate a positive vote.
Thank you. Does anyone on the board feel a need for a break at this point, or can we just keep rolling?
Keep going.
Keep going.
Keep going. Don't stop.
Okay, let's keep rolling. The board will now discuss this application, and I would like to do that in pieces. 4 pieces. The first piece being the stormwater management. Second, the cut-through of Delaware Avenue. Third, the variances, and then an overall discussion before we vote. So let's start by asking the question, are we content with the applicant's view of how stormwater should be managed? This involves the creation of an HOA and the ongoing maintenance. Any member of the board have an opinion on that?
It's the right way to do it, in my opinion. I think we've heard from our township engineer that it's appropriate, and I'd support that. I know it's an onus on the applicant, but it has to be done given the current laws.
Any other comments?
I have a comment on that. The one thing that I'm concerned about is the HOA part of it. I too have had experience with HOAs and the legal monkey business that people can get up to, and whenever you have, I'm also very sensitive to the stormwater situation in this town, and so the only way that I would be happy enough to vote in favour here would be if the township committee would actually, the municipality would actually take over the responsibility for the ongoing maintenance of the storm retention pond, because that, for me, is the only way that we are going to be able to ensure that all of the residents are properly served by this. The HOA just doesn't, it just doesn't do it for me.
Is there not maybe an alternative to look at a contingency in regards to starting out with an HOA and having a contingent obligation for the town should that HOA not perform? I mean, that was one thought I had.
Yeah, no, I mean, and if I could, I mean, my issue there is I like to have as much as possible a kind of clear, bright line, especially whenever it comes to the issues associated with stormwater in this town, right? And so we can layer in all of this, but it takes time. People have different schedules, and they talk through one another, and you're injecting potential delay. And when it comes to stormwater, that's an issue for me. And so that's why I think with the township committee, and it'd be obviously be a decision by the full township committee as to whether they would be willing to take on this responsibility. But for me, that's the only way I would be comfortable and feel that the residents in this area had been fully served.
Yeah, my understanding, and it's limited at best, is that this isn't the only place where we're going to have this issue in town, that there's maybe a dozen other properties in town that will have basins subject to maintenance, and the maintenance that's required by the state. And so what we're aware on the committee is that we do have a gap that we may need to address via resolution to ensure that maintenance is being done, because there are reporting requirements that are coming down incumbent upon the town, which we're going to have to make incumbent upon homeowners, not just this property. Right. And so, you know, what we can only look at here is a stopgap solution to this through the HOA until the committee's had a chance to kind of deliberate, opine, and figure out a solution going forward. If that's some sort of an ordinance or something like that, which, you know, imposes responsibilities on homeowners to do maintenance and report on an annual basis, I think it is.
So there's annual reporting requirements under the MS4 Tier A permit, which
Right.
is the township's permit.
Right.
The township inherits the requirement to report on the entire municipality. So there is a pass down to every responsible party to submit annual reports that are then a part of the township's reporting. That's that responsible party hook. And just before you continue to discuss this, just a little further clarification for you. Right now, we have an applicant who is your first responsible party, potential of an entity that he would transition to, and the potential of a transition to the township. The entity of the applicant and the second entity he could transition to, their responsibilities, if not met, can be imposed by the municipality to take on the action, lien the properties, or take other remedies to be satisfied whole for the activities you do on their property, whether this is a residential, commercial, industrial development. That's the purpose of the responsible party. Said another way, the township inheriting you should be considering that you'll be doing the same effort that you would do if somebody was the responsible party, but you would be burdening the costs amongst the municipality. And so that's why it's not just obviously for this application discussion and that consideration of an ordinance, setting benchmarks of how you threshold this, but you do have mechanisms in place today under your existing permit and your obligations to enforce the maintenance to occur immediately with haste.
So one question there is, when does the town step in, right? Are there clear, is there a clear line that once it's crossed, the town steps in, or is it up for debate and, again, the potential of delay through process?
So I'm surprised it's not in 5:8 because it is discussed in the model ordinance that the state has put out, but there is a specific reference to within 14 days action to be taken, or else that violation escalates to the town being able to come on private property and do the maintenance as required.
Right, but I'm talking about the quantum of maintenance that's required, right? Is that up for debate? Is that up for the HOA or whatever entity it might be to say, look, we've actually taken care of this. You guys are wrong in coming in here and doing what you're doing?
No, ultimately, so there will be a maintenance plan put in place that's part of the final resolution compliance of this application, if approved. That sets the requirements. Then it's up to the township engineer to assess whether or not the maintenance records that are provided are adequate and if the maintenance is happening in timely fashion, and then they are enabled to take enforcement action.
Does that come in the form of a deed restriction?
The maintenance plan is required to be deed restricted to all 4 of the lots individually, yes. And then there is a requirement that annually the plan is reviewed on whether or not the maintenance is appropriate still, or if escalating maintenance is required for an aging system. The plan would then be required to be amended. Those costs would be absorbed by the responsible party to amend it and to file an amended deed.
So it'd be specific, measurable, and supported by evidence.
Yes.
But there is another way to do it right now. It's for the town to step in and become that
The
responsible
town
party.
may
then-
become that responsible party, inherit the system.
Right, but it can, but right now from Mr. Parisi, right, that it can go to the HOA's responsible party, or it can go to
Yes.
the town, right? And so, what you say is all well and good on paper. I've experienced these things. I've been around in municipal government for the past decade, and I've heard things that sound great on paper that don't actually work that way whenever you're in practice.
Understood.
And it's stormwater here. It's a neighborhood. It's people.
It's
for
it's
me.
additional staff at
Yeah.
Public Works. It's, for every time that, we'll use somebody else as an example, the Board of Education, for every time the fields aren't mowed at the Board of Education, it's because of staffing concerns or ability to get to the maintenance. It's a consideration for the council that outreach is just the ability to make sure the maintenance happens, but also other impacts to staffing and operations of your public works and other facilities.
Sure, and that's why I think the decision has to be made by the entire township committee.
Agreed.
With all of that, but I mean, I just get back to my original, and I won't take up the conversation anymore. It's like,
You have an opinion here?
I've seen what happens here, and the only way I'm comfortable with this, for the sake of the residents, is to have the township committee say, yes, the town will take over the maintenance here. Then I can sleep at night knowing that everything's going to be okay. Any other way, and it's a little bit iffy.
I think a perfectly acceptable condition that this board could condition a potential approval on would be that the applicant would endeavor to apply to the township committee to get them to accept the responsibility of the stormwater management and perpetual maintenance. And should the township committee decline to do so for whatever reason, then they would be responsible under NJAC 7:8 to then designate a proper responsible party, such as an HOA, to perform the maintenance in perpetuity. I just think it's sort of outside this board's jurisdiction at this time, because the board cannot know for certain whether, even though we do have committee members on the board, whether or not the committee would follow through with that. So I think the condition would just have to be worded that says, if the township committee wants to take this on and they pass the ordinance that Joe has discussed, then the applicant would be in compliance with a resolution of approval, and if they decline, we're still protected by having compliance with the stormwater regs.
And if they were to decline, the options would be, it remains with the existing responsible party of the applicant, even after his interests are out of the property. That is legal to the stormwater rules.
Or the creation of
Or
an
the
entity.
creation of an entity, yes.
So my only thing there is, and this may not be possible, right? But would a condition be that the township committee actually accepts, and that would be the municipal, there would be municipal responsibility for the maintenance, and if that, and for whatever reason the township committee didn't, then it doesn't, the applicant can come to the township committee and argue in favor of the township committee taking it, but if they don't, we don't have.
You're saying if the township committee does not accept the perpetual maintenance obligation, then the subdivision approval becomes void.
Right, because other than saying that the applicant would endeavor, right, it hasn't really done anything for me.
Yeah, I understand that concern. I would say, though, that ultimately what this board has jurisdiction to consider is ultimate compliance with the regs. I don't think it can condition a subdivision approval on which of the potential options has to be followed through with. Okay. I don't think it could condition an approval saying, township committee, you either accept this or the board's not granting subdivision approval, because ultimately what this board has to determine is condition of approval compliance with the regs.
Right.
So
So the only way to deviate from that would be consideration of the maintenance section of the model ordinance by the committee to specifically outline that. Because that local code opportunity of the stormwater control ordinance, your SCO, is specifically there to allow the municipality to set standards that are above and beyond NJAC 7.8. So that would be within the committee's jurisdiction to consider that and put that into a codified ordinance. But I do agree that it would not be within our board's jurisdiction to
and that could
split
affect
that
future
hair
applications, obviously, if such an ordinance is passed.
No,
But because they were deemed complete prior, they're subject to what we currently have in place.
You've answered my question. Thank you.
Great.
Just to follow, when we come to the resolution, are you able to detail succinctly those 3 or 4 options that we decided or discussed? Are we able then, as a suggestion or recommendation, can the board recommend that it addresses one option as a preference? Or can we recommend something?
Absolutely.
So could we do that, Brendan? Maybe we could, if we agree, we have the recommendation that the township does pursue this, or is option number 1 or 2, whatever option it is. At least we're given an opinion in this resolution. Would that please help a little bit?
I mean, it might help, but it's I'm sorry, it still doesn't satisfy just me in particular. I have my own.
Sure.
Short of the town, because as I said, if the town comes in and does it, I know it's getting done. Anything else, I'm not so sure. So, I think respectfully, it hasn't changed my opinion on that particular issue.
I think even if you wanted the condition to have more teeth, I'm not suggesting that it may satisfy your concern specifically, but you could do a shall apply to the township committee for acceptance, and in the event of declination, then it reverts to the remaining responsible party language. That's the best I think the board could do.
Okay, that'd be better than endeavor.
Sure.
Certainly
Okay.
get rid of the word endeavour.
Got it.
And I would certainly suggest that we do potentially make a recommendation of that if we collectively agree.
Matt and Brendan and Joe all seem to be nodding their heads that this is a good plan, that we approve the subdivision as applied and add a condition that the applicant apply to the Township Committee for relief as an escape clause, and if not, they proceed with the application as filed. Is that agreeable with everyone?
Dennis, I mean, and again, I'm just, for me, it's not, that's not agreeable. I was shaking I was nodding because I realised, right, it's been explained to me the responsibility of the board, but on this particular issue, I know I may be in the minority, but that doesn't quite satisfy. So your statement to me isn't necessarily correct.
Be careful. Shake what you shake your head at.
And again, I would
Exactly.
just mention any recommendation that we can put forth as well, if people agree to that. That we will go with the preferred option being the township.
Yeah, there's no reason the condition couldn't say the planning board recommends option number 1, but should it fail, these are our fail-safes. That can be done.
Thank you. Does anybody disagree with that?
No, except Brendan.
No? Okay. I think it's about as question.
Any objection to this proposal? We'll leave it up to the experts to draft it. The second discussion item is Delaware Avenue, and this, I think, is pretty much binary. If anyone wants to make a 1-minute statement about their position, we'll start with Don.
Thanks. No, and I appreciate the public's comments on this issue. I do feel for you. I live on an avenue too, and I do deal with people going way too fast and not paying attention, as we all experience on the roadways, especially it seems post-COVID. I think we've gotten to be worse drivers somehow. So I appreciate the concern associated with this, but I also appreciate Mr. English's testimony with regards to the safety and the access issues. It is called an avenue for a reason. I've always thought of avenue, it's interesting, I looked up the definition before I came to the meeting on avenue. It doesn't say anything about through streets. It talks about a broad tree-lined street is what the definition of avenue is in Merriam-Webster's dictionary. So I guess if the applicant can stipulate to potentially some means to help calm traffic through that area, I'm sure people will be awash in your fantastic architectural design, Mr. Parisi, and maybe slow down as they go through that area. The one thing I will say, just to finish my comment, is there is one advantage, is there is a natural curve to the roadway as you come to that area, and that will naturally slow traffic down, versus the other part of Delaware Avenue is one big long straightaway, which I could see speeds definitely climbing in that area. And there is some topography as well.
Right in that area.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I know it pretty well. Yeah.
Right, but there is a natural curve that doesn't appear that you're changing in the overall design, that essentially that curve that's actually shown now will stay the same as you go down into and closer to Morristown Road. So I'm inclined to be in favor of the cut through in that regard.
Teresa?
Yeah, I agree with Don. I appreciate all of the residents' comments. It really, I really do take them to heart, and I appreciate them. If they don't go unnoticed. I do think it's a balance between two different issues of safety, and so there's no, I think, perfect answer. I've also lived in this town for a long time, and I'm very familiar with that area, that a lot of people that cut through it right now will be the people that continue to cut through it, and we will see, you know, whether there's a huge increase or not, but my impression is that there's already people coming down Lower Overlook into Delaware every single day, and yeah, I mean, like, I wish we could all live on quiet cul-de-sacs. I do not, so it sounds really nice, but I'm inclined to also cut through because I think it's, you know, a helps safety for our first responders and, yeah, thank you.
Alan?
Well, you know, I shared with you the full text of the 1995 circulation element, which very specifically recommends the completion of that street. At the same time, it also contemplates the possibility of Lower Overlook and I think High Street also being completed, but the completion of those other streets does not negatively impact
Pass that down.
the master plan, very specifically stating that Delaware Avenue should be a through street to encourage circulation in the town. But that's the end of my comments.
Okay, Brendan?
Yeah, I have to agree with the other board members on this issue. I think it should be a through street, and it certainly was contemplated in the master plan in 1996, and you know, as Alan shared with me, the improvements on Lower Overlook as well, and so I think, and I've been a victim of this myself. Whenever changes in roads have been proposed, where I tend to think the worst, that it's going to be increased traffic, safety, everything that's been presented today. And I don't mean to minimise these, but it's been my experience that it never quite lives up to that. And it's also the other point here is that if it does open up, there are ways that we can actually ascertain with some specificity the traffic patterns and the speeds and the increase in traffic and all the rest of it. And if that is an issue, we can get early warning of that and then adopt numerous traffic calming strategies, some of which have already been alluded to tonight. So I would be in favour.
Thank you, residents, for coming out and speaking. Safety is a huge concern for me. I live on a street that does have it's not deemed a high-traffic area, but there are a lot of cars that come through that area. I actually live on a windy spot where my house is on the high part of that windy spot, and people like to cut that corner. And I could be out there blowing leaves, and I have to keep my head on a swivel. If we vote in favor of the connection of Delaware Ave, I absolutely want, and it's a failure that it wasn't done, a traffic study done, but I would like to see some kind of speed bumps put in. I want a sign that says no through traffic. I want something, and not just one solution, but a couple, to make sure that it's not a runway or a drag strip through that area. I've driven through that area. I know the route, and it's mostly going to be people who know the route. I don't see it as a cut-through advantage for Valley Road to sidestep a couple of traffic lights, because you're going to come down to that 16-foot wide section, going to have to make a decision, go left or right on Maple, and then you're going to have to deal with any oncoming traffic as you go through there. So I appreciate the measurements. Thank you for that. I never got out and measured it, but I know it's tight when I'm just taking my RAV4 through there, so it's not a big street. But I definitely want something in there for safety, and not just one means, multiple means for safety. Thank you.
Yeah. So your concern was the stormwater management. Mine's going to be this, and this will be the hill that I will be very concerned about. I wish it was a hill. I'd be less concerned. But I get the master plan. Believe me, I get the master plan. I get the niceties of the master plan. But when I hear this and the prior applications, with the residents being so thoughtful and forceful in their reaction to this one situation, I don't think anybody's overly too concerned about the number of properties, better than was before perhaps. But the fact that we haven't got and addressed this in a a way, I think, Tom, you're probably the closest to at least talk about calming traffic. I think we have to have a more thoughtful discussion about what that looks like. With my preference, it's not a cut through, because I hear both sides of the area universally saying they do not want it. Right. I know low overlook, I get it, I drive that way. And if this was Delaware was connected, I'll be coming here through Delaware every time I come here. Great for me, saves me some time. I don't know if I don't live there, and I have to take that into greater consideration as a residential area within the master plan, listen to the residents who have invested their time, money into those properties, and their concerns, to me, outweighs the niceties of a master plan in this situation. So I would not want this to go forward without that being strongly addressed, even to the point of what we discussed earlier, cul-de-sac. I think cul-de-sac's a great word. Avenue's too big. Put it in Avenue in Paris, I'll be happy. Avenue New York, fantastic. But you know the name streets in the US are misnomers to what they really mean, and they are. So I don't take much heedance by avenue. Cul-de-sac is a good word to me. I think it has meaning and purpose. So for me, that's where I stop. Thank you.
So,
I'm going to just pick up on comments Don and Teresa made earlier. I'm actually in favor of a through street. Don mentioned the definition of an avenue is a tree-lined street, and Teresa said she'd love to live on a no-outlet street. Well, I do live on no-outlet street in Gillette, and since I've lived there since 2004, twice I've had trees fall across the road, one during Hurricane Sandy where we were actually locked into our road for 3 days. Another one was only 24 hours. And I know everybody at that end of the street wishes they had a way out. Would have been very helpful, and there's just no way you could do it where we are. I would hate to have that happen to the people in Chestnut Run. If a tree fell across the entrance to Delaware, you would be trapped in there. I do, however, think that some conditions can be granted with signs, maybe children at play or slow, speed, something to, I know narrowing the streets as traffic calming would not be an option. Maybe some speed bumps like Mr. Jones suggested would help, but I have to also agree that safety is a primary concern, and the access of getting safety vehicles in there should be a major concern, and that's why I'm in favor of pushing the road through.
Me? Hi. I'll create an analogy, and it's probably a corny one, but I have this tree that started growing in my yard 15 years ago. It was a weed. It just started growing. It's a honey locust. Now, 15 years later, it's about 9 inches in diameter. The town protects that tree now, right? I can't cut that tree down. It wasn't. I could say it wasn't there. I want to take it out, but I can't. I got to register to take that tree down, and that's, neighborhoods grow around streets as well, and we just can't cut down neighborhoods, change neighborhoods based upon rules from 30 years ago, where situations changed and traffic patterns changed than what they were anticipated, and we're citing a draft of a master plan that isn't even done. I don't think that's necessarily fair. Now, I can tell by listening to the comments here that a majority of this committee is in favor of a cut-through, and I respect that. But we absolutely should make it a condition to figure out ways to make this safe and to preserve the characteristics of the neighborhood. There should be a stop sign at that intersection, right where it goes into the woods. There should be children playing sign. It should be 15 miles an hour, 20 miles, whatever. But we have to do something, because obviously everybody on both sides of the fence, both sides of the woods, wants something done there. And I'm dissatisfied with the fact that I haven't seen any movement to satisfy these people along those lines. And so, you know, I would implore everybody here to work towards some sort of a solution that everybody finds acceptable. I get it. Having that through street, yeah, it's a good thing, but it shouldn't be a thoroughfare. It shouldn't be something that people go down Valley Road or Long Hill Road and they're speeding through there. I mean, that doesn't even make sense. So we're going to have to do something to throttle it on the Morristown Road end. So, you know, whatever decision we come to here, we have to come to a decision that has some conditions upon this to alleviate the fears of the residents in the neighborhood, because it's the neighborhood that matters. And it's the neighborhood that grew up around the streets that have been there for the last 30 years. It's the neighborhoods that matter in this town. I live on Sunny Slope. Anybody been on Sunny Slope? Well, Google Maps takes people down 40 miles an hour going to the Oak Flower Pub. And I'm waiting for the day when one of my dogs or my kids gets hit. Right? I don't want that on Delaware. I've said my piece.
I am reminded of the rhetoric a few years ago when we were talking about Oaks Road and how that would become a speed trap, or speedway, if it were paved. And sometimes I sit there waiting for cars to come speeding on Oaks Road, and there are none. With regard to Delaware, anyone who thinks that there's a shortcut between Morristown Road and Central Avenue is going to drive up Delaware, and they're soon going to get to Chestnut and discover that that's a one-way, one-lane uphill road, and if there's a car coming downhill by the side of the lake, they're going to have to, one of you is going to have to pull into the grass in order to get past. And very likely you won't take that shortcut again. Now, I'm not suggesting that we widen Chestnut. I think it's perfectly fine as is for the use that it serves. I have parked at the corner of Skyview and Delaware, watching the shortcut traffic that's coming down Lower Overlook. And those cars are few and far between. I don't think that Delaware Avenue, establishing a cut-through on Delaware Avenue is going to change that very much. A few people will know that it exists, but for safety purposes, we have many ways. We can post speed limit signs, we can post weight limit signs, we can, of course, enforce the speed limit, and Lord knows we have a police department that's capable of doing that. Fear of non-enforcement is not the way we should be making decisions. With regard to a traffic study, I'm not sure that a traffic study would do us any good, because we're talking about a potential alternate route between two towns that really doesn't exist today. So I side with the emergency services and with the alternate access in the event of trees down, and I would be in favor of cutting it through. Just to clarify things, I'd like to see a show of hands, cut through versus cul-de-sac. Cut through. Cul-de-sac. Okay, it looks like cut through has it. The next discussion item is the variances.
Well, hang on a second before you finish, if I might. Clapping. Do we have professionals' opinions on some of the options that there could be, or how would we discuss that as a condition for traffic, as opposed to just blindly going with?
May I just interject 1 second on that particular issue, since you specifically asked that?
Yeah.
And it's really following along with what the chairman just said. If this is approved, This road obviously is going to be a public street. It's going to be dedicated to the township, in which case the township has the discretion to do whatever they want along these lines. It's, in my opinion, not even really appropriate for this board to try to come up with those because it's something that the township ultimately should be doing.
Yeah, I was asking the
As opposed to
question.
we'll put the
asking your
road through.
opinion. I was asking a question or your opinion. So is that something that we could consider? Do we have options that we could put as a condition that we think about alternatives? We heard about signs, we heard about road bumps, and speed bumps are not good. Apparently, I looked it up.
Can I interject for a second?
Yeah, please.
Because Chairman's voice vote there, he took a poll. But I think really the poll should be cut through, no conditions, or cut through with conditions.
I would agree. And that's what I was trying to get
Well, the
at.
conditions are all up to the township committee, their enforcement issues. And the township committee has the right to enforce those issues and will probably have to have an open resolution to accept the street, at which point these matters can all be discussed.
Yeah,
But I don't believe that there is any way we can condition approval on the basis that the township has to do certain things after the street's approved.
I'm going in a different direction. Who here is voting for a cut-through and holding their nose?
I mean, I think I'm voting for a cut through, Scott. Not holding my nose, but basically, right now we have a picture painted of what will happen with a cut through, and minds can differ on that. And so I think with the cut through, we will be able to ascertain exactly what we have. Do we have a problem? If we do have a problem, what are the metes and bounds of that problem? And then we'll be able to take the appropriate action. And I think it's really goes to it goes to then the township committee, as the chairman just stated, that it's up to the township committee to implement whatever standards need to be implemented in order to control that issue. But until we can actually objectively ascertain what that issue is, I don't think that I can opine on whether we should have them or not.
How does that differ from the HOA discussion, where you wanted the township to be directed by this discussion to do something, and now you're saying you don't want to be directed, so we can't have the discussion about some options and choices that we discussed, and at least get them articulated into a conversation as opposed to a blanket binary yes or no on a cul-de-sac or
Okay.
Or a recommendation to the township committee. Should
Oh,
this body give a recommendation? And what we're not doing is, by avoiding the question now and not putting a recommendation forward, we're basically ignoring everybody out there.
No. I think a recommendation is fine, right? I mean, that's okay. I wasn't saying we shouldn't have a recommendation if that's what the majority
And we have no
feel,
objection to that.
right?
It's not what you
That's
just
fine.
said a minute ago,
But-
right?
But the
No,
risk
we
you
have no objection to recommendations to
That was
township
not what you
committees.
said a minute ago.
separate from
You
a
cut me
condition.
off when I was asking an opinion about what those recommendations could be. Thank you.
But I mean, if
But the risk that you take, the more specific you are as a condition of approval. If that condition turns out not to be viable, what are you gonna do? Reopen the application?
No, we said there's 4 options with the HOA conversation with the, right? We're only suggesting that it's deeply thought about, some of these suggestions. If we had a reasonable dialogue, we may be able to uncover more of these things.
But this body probably isn't the best to do that. The township committee, I think, is.
Oh, agree.
and
No difference
actually-
with the stone wall.
no, well, I mean, if I could, I mean, my recommendation would be, that we actually put we use the proper methods to determine speed and number of cars, and we do it over a certain length of time in order to, as I say, ascertain what the problem is, and then let the experts to come in and do whatever they need to do. So my one recommendation would not be speed bumps or this or that. The next thing, it would be, let's just do what the police do, allow them to, they do it on all of the roads. They actually did it on Oaks Road, right? And so that would be our recommendation. Now, the thing of it, the HOA discussion is a little bit different as far as I'm concerned, and it could very well be that, as I say, this is peculiarly personal to me, right? is that the stormwater is a major, major issue in this town, right? And I know that the township, if it has responsibility for the retention pond, will do what it needs to do in order to make sure that residents aren't flooded out or have some other unfortunate consequences of flooding. And that's, for me, is the only sure way of doing it. We can layer in all kinds of things that seem in paper as though they're going to be good, but major rainstorms, flooded basements, wrangling over whose responsibility it is, as a resident, I don't want that hanging over my head. And so that's the difference for me between the two. And as I say, it could be just me.
Yeah, you see, here's where we part a little bit, and I respect what you're saying about the HOA, and I think the basic premise of what your opinion was on that is you understand how these things work. Things are on paper, but the paper never gets done. Well, it's the same thing with a traffic study that's going to happen in the future after the cut-through's been made. Nothing's going to happen, right?
I disagree there.
No, I disagree. And all I'm saying in a recommendation is that we recommend to the committee that certain things be looked at. For instance, like a stop sign. For instance, like a lower speed limit. For instance, signs that indicate children. Nothing that's would claw this back or nothing that is necessarily actionable, but documents in our comments exactly what we expect the township committee to consider.
Yep. I mean, and again, I don't have an issue
Because we
with
don't
that.
put that in there, nothing's going to happen.
No.
It's going to be a cut through, and then it's
That's not exactly true, because the police department has experts who are quite capable of examining the traffic situation as it develops and making recommendations for stop signs and the like. They are much more professional and much more knowledgeable about what those
and we get
remedies
complaints all
should
the
be.
time. And we get complaints all the time on Myersville Road that people are speeding.
Listen, I cheat. I use Lackawanna Boulevard all the time to avoid the traffic light at Mountain and Valley. And a few years ago, that was a big issue. I drive very carefully. I noticed that about every third or fourth house has a little child plastic sign out front, to remind me to drive carefully. As I recall, there's a radar speed thing up there to help control the traffic. There are lots of ways to fix this, and the police department is well aware of what those are, and I would leave it to them rather than this board throwing an ad hoc recommendation out. Although I don't object to it, I don't think it has any value.
I see no harm whatsoever in putting comments in. I'm glad you don't object to it. I've also seen you in your smoke-filled Cadillac driving past Sunnyslope. Thank you.
And I'll just back on the master plan for 2 seconds. I think one of the fundamentals is residential areas retaining their character. As said earlier, they retain their character. This will not retain the character of two neighbourhoods. So this is my hill. I will not budge on it. So, say being
respect that.
I thought we were done with this item. Are we done now?
Move on.
Just one more thing.
The variances. Does anyone have any comment on the variances that were requested in this application?
That's fine.
All
think-
right.
I
Final
just have one
discussion.
brief comment, and that is the planner's argument that the easement, the location of the easement for the Delaware Avenue completion helps justify the positioning then of the two lots to the south of the road. So I think that justifies the granting of those variances as a C1 hardship.
Sounds good.
Any other comments? All right. Final wrap-up discussion. Anyone have any other additional comments that they haven't stated? Otherwise, are we ready to vote?
Well, I'm not sure we're ready to vote. I think we've got just a general conversation.
Just a general comment.
Mm-hmm.
Putting 4 houses on a total of 10-plus acres does not seem to be excessive at all. The applicant has a fundamental right to develop his property. And the issue before us really is the variances. You know, technically, that's the only reason to deny this application. And they've made it a good enough argument. I think we all agree that the granting of the variance is certainly permissible. So the application should be approved.
I may tend to disagree, all due respect.
I knew that.
I know. I know, yeah. The part of the application, in fact, one of the main parts of the application is the road. Right? So I have issues with that. Therefore, that is my issue. And it will remain an issue unless we concretely, as Felsi, come up with something that we can put forth as real recommendations. If not, say, look, then you know where I stand.
Matt, you want to lead us through the,
Sure. So the applicant's here, it's preliminary and final major subdivision approval. We've discussed the variances, the board members had not a lot to say about the specific variances, but they are for minimum lot area in the portion of the lot that's located in the conservation zone, same with minimum lot width. And there's also the location of lot 16.012 and lot 16.011, partially an improvement located in a critical area. And then there's also a variance relating to the setbacks from said critical area. The conditions of approval, as stated now, is a stipulation to both our planner's review memorandum and our engineer's review memorandum. The applicant to install street lighting to the satisfaction of the board professionals. We've discussed the HOA issue. The applicant shall apply to the township committee upon the board recommendation of same for the township to assume the stormwater maintenance responsibility. In the event of the township committee declining that assignment, the applicant shall, in compliance with applicable regulations, establish a responsible entity that will be thereafter tasked with that maintenance. All easements that are part of this application have to be subject to the review and approval of the board professionals. Same with the operations and maintenance manual for the stormwater management facilities. Deeds for the proposed subdivided lots have to be provided to the satisfaction of the board professionals, with those deeds including the notation and reference to the stormwater management maintenance obligations of the lot owners. All easements also should, if the township accepts them, should name the township as a interested party. If the township doesn't accept, the easement should name the township with the right to maintain, but not an obligation to maintain unless the township committee does assume that obligation. The applicant is going to improve the street to township standards and go to the committee for accepting dedication of that street. I'm not sure if the board wants an additional bit of information there, something along the lines of the board recommends that at that time the township committee explore mitigation efforts for any traffic issues that may arise. No development in the portion of the lot that's subject to the conservation zone. Stormwater management features are to be designed to accommodate the maximum amount of allowable impervious coverage for the zone, i.e. their stipulation that they were going to over-design some of the project to Joe's satisfaction. Obviously, it's subject to all outside agency approvals, including them resolving the septics versus sewer issue, securing appropriate permitting for any importation of fill for grading.
talk to your engineer.
And I think that's all I have.
Just pause for them, because I think I know exactly where he's going. The maximum impervious surface?
Correct.
Yeah, so the point
Go
of
ahead.
the point of discussion was that because of the size of the 10 acres and the significant portion that'll remain in conservation, the maximum impervious surface for build out of these acres is not gonna be met at any point. So they're designing to a more conservative threshold than that they put on the plans already.
Okay.
So, in terms, if we look at the code and the amount of impervious surface the code could generate over these 10 acres, it cannot be accommodated on the property.
So how about we say the over-design to your satisfaction?
That's fine.
I have a question, and that is street lighting for approval by the board engineer or the town engineer?
I think it would probably be town since the road's being dedicated.
Yeah, I would
Makes
think it
sense,
would
yeah.
be the town engineer,
Okay,
but you said board engineer.
okay, I will revise
Yeah,
that.
I have no objection to going to the township engineer.
All right, can I have a motion for all of that?
Motion to approve or deny. A motion to approve subject to conditions or a motion to deny.
Yes.
The only thing I would add to it, and sorry, it was because the recommendations around traffic calming strategies, absolutely 100% okay with that. But the one thing I would say is that there's an appropriate study done by PD to ascertain what exactly the issues that we have, because those will affect the number and type of traffic calming
So-
strategies that we would have.
Recommending that the police department specifically?
If that would, yeah, because that's the entity that has undertaken all these in the past.
Does the
that I
applicant
know
have any
about.
objection to that?
No. Okay. And I would add to that with the outcome that it may include mitigation such as stop signs and speed restrictions, as well as other.
Including but not limited to?
Right, exactly.
Well, I wouldn't put including and not limited to. That would require it, wouldn't it?
That's true.
It may
Right,
include.
May
Okay,
include.
alright.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Stop sign, speed bumps, okay.
And just one more question I have, I'm sorry, I'm very slow tonight. Joe, you mentioned this maximum coverage, I just wanna make
Yes.
sure I'm very clear on that, in this over-design reference. So the lots are large, is the point, correct?
Correct.
And so, what are they able to design to? We're talking about putting on patios and swimming pools and, airstrips in the backyard, whatever, creating impervious surface, right?
Yes.
What is the limit then that they're held to, given the fact that these lots are
So the
over?
requirements of the R2 zone are 20% maximum lot coverage. And
So they would be held,
their current proposal does not exceed 7.7%. And that's a relatively minimal improvements to the property other than basic driveways and some accommodations of walkways. So I would anticipate a lot like that, which is 16.011. That threshold may be closer to 10%, but the portion of
But
1602,
in essence, though, the applicant can take it up to the R2 to 20% when they come in for.
they can. To my satisfaction is what we were discussing. At the benchmark, it's a gray area. It essentially, we're looking at identifying enough area in the volume to the basin so that normal accommodations of walkways, patios, a reasonably sized driveway, sheds can be accommodated on each lot. And from there, that would accommodate the bulk in the major development stormwater of this facility as it's approved and in the maintenance plan. and then it would leave only smaller accommodations as a potential of small dry wells that would amend the system. And that way, there's an assurance that there's no additional large-scale BMPs that need to be installed.
So the basin is designed to what impervious coverage
It's not gonna be,
right now?
it's not gonna be a percent number I can give you
Maybe
now,
that's a
or
question
a
for
square
you.
footage that,
Yeah, I guess I can just say, I think
Microphone.
there's one right there.
what we were anticipating doing and what is currently before the board is we designed it for up to 5,000 square feet of impervious surface per lot. We were going to work with Joe's office to actually increase that a little bit more to somewhere between 6,000 and 7,000 square feet of impervious coverage per lot, in addition to the impervious associated with the roadway that would otherwise be built and conveyed and then detained and stored in the stormwater device. And I think more importantly, why we're picking that specific number or a number like that is the basin's been designed, the limited disturbance has been designed. If we were going to go for that 20%, our limited disturbance would have to vastly expand, and then we're eliminating additional tree area, potentially getting into the conservation zone, into the regulated areas that we're trying to avoid. So that was kind of the thought process behind it.
So it's that projection of impervious cover is what the design, your design is of the basin?
Right, so any individual lot development would have a threshold or a limit that they could go up to as part of this overall development design, and then anything beyond that would be, they would have to provide something too.
Mr. Chairman? You ready
You guys
for,
got that?
you ready for a motion now?
What does this do to change?
Nothing.
It doesn't. It's just rather than designing it up to the maximum impervious in the zone, it's designing it above what maybe is shown currently on the plans, but to accommodate future driveways, sheds, patios, things like that, in which case it doesn't become what Joe refers to as a creeping major development where individual lot owners are then required to install,
Additional
very
mitigation.
burdensome mitigation as opposed to just a small dry well or something like
Okay.
that. So it's something that it's a matter of foresight by the board engineer in order to over-design the project to accommodate
Good,
it.
good. Ms. Lahaney, do you have anything to add? Can I hear a motion to approve this subject to the final resolution?
So moved.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. File,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Richardson,
Yes.
Mayor Lavender,
Yes.
Committeeman Ray.
I'm in the minority here, but I have to say no on the basis of the stormwater issue. It's that important to me. Otherwise, it's a fairly straightforward application, and I agree with all the other discussion.
Ms. Still,
Yes.
Mr. Hands,
No, and for similar reasons, but for the through road, so no to that.
Mr. Jones,
No.
Mr. Malinowski,
Yes.
Chairman Sandow.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you all very much, both for this evening and for the last meeting, and have a wonderful evening.
Just for advanced planning, we'll do the resolution on October 24.
Okay.
That's the second next meeting.
Thank you for giving me some time.
Mr. Parisi, congratulations.
Thank you all for
finally.
coming.
Thank you for coming. 10 acres, 4 houses.
No, because they want to give it.
Fred, you'll get a draft in advance.
Thank you.
Like 10 a.m. tomorrow?
No. I think I'm 7 resolutions behind for different boards, so.
So in other words, it's not gonna be waiting for tomorrow when I walk in?
No, will not be, I apologize.
We're not done. That room, we got 2 more items left. Okay, the board will please come to order.
Thanks for your persistence.
Oh, I think we should definitely do that. I think
Lies with honey.
Yeah, okay.
We've got 2 more items of business. The next item of business is the approval of the minutes of September 12. This will be carried to a later meeting. The final item tonight is to publish the draft master plan that was issued, dated today, to publish that for public hearing at our next meeting on October the 10th. You've all seen the draft. You've all been contributing to it for more or less 10 years. And it has been polished to within an inch of its life by Ms. Lehaney for the past couple of weeks. She has received comments from several versions of the draft, and I believe she has incorporated all those comments that are worth incorporating. So at this point, I would like to propose that the board acknowledge that the draft exists and agree to publish it for public hearing at the next meeting.
Mr. Chair, before we make any additional comments, can I ask that the link be put on the landing page of the Long Hill Township website, so it's not 4 clicks deep into the website? So a link from the main page, when people go to when residents go to the Long Hill Township website, it's right there, front and center.
Ms. Ogens has already made that request to the Township Committee at its last meeting, and I believe they've agreed.
Okay. I was hoping that you would also endorse that. Also, down at the DPW, there's a sign there. That's a billboard sign. Can we put something up there so anyone who's not looking at the website or not following along on this or hasn't followed along the life cycle of the master plan, can we put up something on that bulletin board that says draft master plan available for residents? Go see Township website.
There's a public notice in the newspaper.
I'm talking on the town board on Valley Road where people go driving by.
Mr. Jones, if you want to email me that suggestion, and I will forward that to the governing body and to our administrator and our executive assistant so that they can coordinate that.
Just an FYI, I did that before with the other master plan, and it's the community centre who you need to contact.
Well, we don't do it directly. It has to go through the administrator's office.
Yeah, I just said you go to the community.
I thought we did banner planes here in town, didn't we? Don't we fly banner planes?
I'm happy to run the channel.
I have to follow my protocol.
And just an FYI, I also we did it at the emergency EMT as well. There's 2 signs that we use for prior.
We don't have the board sign up, the electronic board sign, because I would expect it would be there, but maybe in the next iteration.
Those 2 places we did it before.
Mr. Chair, may I ask just one question before the draft is released? Today, it was called the 1995 Master Plan, the 1996 Master Plan, and the 1997 Master Plan.
It's the old.
Can you tell me which is the correct date? Because it's
The correct date is 97. That's when it was finally adopted. It's called the 96 Master Plan, but it wasn't until adopted formally until after the new year.
Okay, thank you.
Was it not adopted on April 1996? That was what?
Well, it was written as the 96 Master Plan, but it didn't get adopted until 97.
No, I understand, but the
The title page says 96.
But the examination says April 30th, 96 was when it was adopted. So
That was probably wrong.
It's irrelevant to the current discussion.
that's done by.
I'll use 1997.
They probably used the wrong.
My last and final request, when we're doing the public hearing, will we be able to use Zoom?
Hold on a second. The good news is, by calling it the 97 master plan, then the 2003 re-examination was within the required 6-year interval. If it was the 96 master plan, then that re-exam was a year late.
All right, we're
So
putting
I'm willing to call it the
3 part
97 plan.
I don't care, it's old, it's outdated, and it's caused us grief in this, in this last application. So, can we use Zoom at the public hearing?
Is that a question for the chairman or me?
I'm
sure
sorry.
it's the chairman, but I'm sure he's gonna punt it over to you.
I'm
Can
sorry.
we use Zoom at the public hearing
Well,
for the master plan?
I do not see the value there personally.
We also would have to redo all of our notices because we
And,
didn't provide.
yeah,
for
the
Zoom
notice has
notice.
already been published that it will be here in the courtroom. So I am content that if anyone wants to make a comment on the master plan, they can appear in the courtroom.
But, Dennis, what if we did the hybrid? We have it here in the courtroom, but we also have Zoom as we do.
Well, it's available on television, it's available on the, through the website. The only thing you're lacking is the ability to talk back.
Right, and I mean, I think that's the point here, where we're maximizing the ability of everyone to participate in that meeting, and I know that there's Pam has certainly voiced this to me, but others have too, that that would be preferred, that there is that ability on Zoom, and if it wouldn't affect if it wouldn't affect the notices, then I would certainly be in favour of it.
We would have to redo the notice to do Zoom.
Is that a big deal?
Does that?
Yes.
Does that?
It would be only because you're required to give notice 10 days in advance, and if we,
10 calendar days or 10 business days?
10 calendar days.
Are we inside the 10 calendar days?
You are, but you have to establish publication through the newspaper, and there's no guarantee at this juncture that we would meet the deadline.
The deadline for the newspaper was Monday.
Yeah.
And you will recall, we saw the draft of the notice at our previous meeting when we agreed to publish the notice of the hearing.
And you'll also recall that I've asked this question before about using Zoom. Just noting that.
All right, can I hear a motion, Don, to release this draft for public comment?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you. I think that's the end of our agenda.
Not a moment too soon. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Yeah, how about you?
Hi, Pam.
You,
Long time.
oh.